Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm able to hear. And how about my voice?
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So, good evening, everyone. I welcome you to today's session, this live session of my NEP competition being organized by Vidya Bharati. Today we have extremely talented and इतने सारे feathers सर के कैप पर हैं कि जब मैं introduction सर का पढ़ रही थी, I myself got so inspired and so mesmerized. So just for the audience और सब लोगों को जानने के लिए, I would like to introduce our today's speaker. हमारे बीच में आज प्रोफेसर अनिल दत्तात्रेय सहस्त्रबुद्धि सर हैं. आप प्रोफेसर हैं मैकेनिकल इंजीनियरिंग के इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी आईआईटी गुवाहाटी में, और आप अभी करंटली चेयरमैन हैं ऑल इंडिया काउंसिल फॉर टेक्निकल एजुकेशन एआईसीटीई में. प्रोफेसर अनिल डी सहस्त्रबुद्धे has held several important academic, research and administrative positions at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Tata Consulting Engineers Northeastern Regional Institute of Science and Technology NERIST, Itanagar, Arunachal Pradesh, and IIT Guwahati. He has also served as Director, College of Engineering, Pune, since 2006 on deputation from IIT Guwahati prior to joining as AICTE Chairman. As an academician and researcher, he has taken up several new initiatives for academic, curricular and co-curricular activities, entrepreneurship, research and good governance. He is chairman, Basic Scientific Research, BSR Empowered Committee of UGC and SWAYAM Board. He is fellow of ISTE, IET, Institution of Engineers, INAE. He has been bestowed with several awards, which include Maha Entrepreneur Award 2011 of Praj Industries, Jeevan Gaurav Puruskar Award from MIT World Peace University, Pune in 2019, and Mahatma Gandhi Leadership Award from Indian Achievers Forum and CSR Times 2019. We welcome you, sir, and I hand it over to you since because of the technical glitches, we have already wasted a lot of time. So without wasting any more time, I would further ask you to begin your session.
Yeah, thank you, Mahamida. I hope it is audible. And I had cataract operation only yesterday. So when the light is too high, in between, I will keep wearing my glasses. Excuse me for that.
You're looking very smart, sir.
No, but I would like to be without glasses as much as possible. When I find it difficult, I will just join in.
Your voice is cracking.
The new national education policy, which was announced on 29th of July 2020, was a very, very long-awaited policy which has come after long 34 years. If you look at the history of education in India, we must go back to ages, right from the Gurukula system to the ancient universities like Takshila and Nalanda, which were there for about 2,500 years ago to about 1,500 years ago. And then subsequently, somehow there was a gap which has happened because of invasions that happened on India. And we today think that the education and the universities all have come from the West. The first new university in the modern era came from Bologna in Italy in 1088 AD. But before that, we had a long history of educational institutions. Having said this, when we talk about new education policy, obviously we must reflect upon what happened right at the time of independence in 1947. We had a Dr. Radhakrishnan report, the second president of India, and it had many elements which are there in the today's policy as well. But subsequently, in 1966 to 68, there was a formal policy which was enunciated by the government of India, followed by that in 1986, and then 1992, a revised policy, and now 34 years after that, a new policy has come. Some elements and threads continue right from independence till today. But what is significant is I started with the talk that ancient Indian universities existed. So some of the thought processes of that era have been brought for the first time in a formal way, although Dr. Radhakrishnan had spoken about them in the report of the Radhakrishnan report. I will come to some of those issues little later, but what is significant that it has happened in this particular policy we must appreciate is that the policies earlier also, which were announced in 68 and 86 and 92, did have very good elements, but it was always the problem of implementation. Some of the parts of that were never implemented in the right spirit as that it should be. And that is what this present government of Modi is likely to do much better in terms of implementation, because the focus has been on implementation and bringing results, rather than just the policy being announced. Actually, that is what is very, very significant. And the reflection can be seen from the very fact that on the 29th of July the policy was announced. Within a week, on the August 7th, when then Ministry of HRD and the UGC had a large scale nationwide seminar, webinar, when all vice chancellors and educationists had joined. Prime Minister himself spoke for 45 minutes, giving details about what is the policy containing all about. That means the policy took little longer time for formulating, for about 5 years. Since the last government came in 2015, it was announced and finally made its headway in 2020. But nevertheless, during these 5 years, there were a lot of deliberations, discussions with all stakeholders, right from panchayats, 2.5 lakh panchayats. There are several towns and cities where this policy was discussed, where industry people were involved, where educationists were involved, where parliamentarians and as well as people from legislature were involved. Prime Minister himself had 3 rounds of meeting with the chairman of the committee, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, and other members of the committee before this policy was finally approved by the cabinet and then announced. And then within the first week, there was a large scale seminar. And after that, within 1 week, people keep asking, when is this going to be implemented? I say it is already implemented, because on 14th of August, one day prior to the Independence Day, the cabinet already announced the change of the name of the ministry from Ministry of HRD to Ministry of Education. I think there is a change which has already happened. And thereafter, we have seen a slew of reforms happening all around in terms of several webinars, suggestions coming in. I think the entire idea of going through the activities of new education policy in terms of policy, which has been already framed in implementation, is very, very important. And today we are discussing, and I'm very happy that the organization which you refer to and which we are now meeting together has already announced a grand competition for students from class 9 to 12, one stage, the people who are in the undergraduates, those who are citizens, and there are all variety of competitions. Actually, Vidya Bharati has done a splendid job in involving people in sort of understanding the policy and then in terms of even implementation, and in a very simple manner, whether it is a 2-minute talk, whether it is essay competition, whether it is caricature, cartoons, whether it is short films. I think these interesting things which have happened has really energized the whole nation in terms of taking this policy to the, again, block level. It has come from the people and it is going back to the people. And often we say that democracy is for the people, of the people, and by the people. So I will say that this policy of 2020 NEP is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's why there is widespread acceptance and a lot of appreciation all around. Now I'll come to few salient features, and then I will also answer a few of the questions. I will start with primary education and then slowly get into higher education and many other issues which are associated with the policy. As far as the primary education is concerned, we are all used to 10+2 system for a long time, for about now 3 decades or so. So this policy talks about education in the formative years in the form of 5+3+3+4, and that makes it 15 years. So 12 years is going to become 15 years. So people may think that there is going to be increase in the number of years, but it is end point is the same at the age of around 18. Right now we were studying from the age of 6 in the class 1, but now the new policy talks about getting into the school at the age of 3 itself rather than 6. And the first 5 years are absolutely free in terms of learning in an absolutely free environment. That means there's no pressure on the kid to learn. We have seen in many cities and towns today also there are nursery, lower KG, upper KG, or it is Balwadi or Anganwadi. Such cases do exist, but not all children go through this exercise. Most of them come directly to the school at the age of 6 and in the class 1. But now formally all schools will be integrated, Balwadis, lower KG, upper KG, into the school education, and we start off with at the age of 3. So these 5 years are going to be the absolutely enjoyable years. And we see in different families when the kids are being sent to the lower KG or upper KG or class 1, many of them keep crying because they distaste going to the school. There are very few children who enjoy going to the school. That is because the way we start teaching them in the school, right from asking them to write scripts, reading books, etc. Instead of that, from home when they come first time to the school, I think the environment should be very, very smooth. Transition must be very, very smooth, enjoyable for the kid. And that is what is being talked about in terms of games, in terms of exercises, which are all in terms of learning, but not through a very formal way of reading and writing. The 3 R's which we normally talk about and call about. But here there will be storytelling, there will be interaction between students, there will be a lot of games through which learning starts taking place. Moreover, it is in the mother tongue and it is very very significant. ये बहुत important है कि पहली प्राथमिक शिक्षा जो है वो अपनी मातृभाषा में शुरू होनी चाहिए और होगी. इसका मतलब यह है कि घर से जब छात्र छात्राएं अपनी पहली बार स्कूल में आते हैं तो उनको वातावरण में बदल नहीं होना चाहिए. उनको लगना चाहिए कि आप घर में ही आए हैं. टीचर को भी उनको जैसे माँ के जैसे लगना चाहिए या पिताजी जैसे लगना चाहिए. ये महत्वपूर्ण है कि उनको अनेक भाषाओं को एक साथ में सिखाया जा सकता है जब हम खेल के माध्यम से उनको सिखाएंगे. So that is a very important, beautiful thing that is being done in this particular policy. But there is no force on the child to learn which language, any language. But essentially, up to class 5, the standard, which is very very liberal, as I said, is going to be in the mother tongue. After that, next 3 years will be also in the mother tongue. Followed by that, child can learn in any language it likes. But even provision for learning up to degree education in terms of their own mother tongue is also first time possible. Today we say that only few courses like arts are possible in mother tongue, that is in different Indian languages, but rest of them are all taught in English. So we are going to have a big change in terms of this characteristic as well. So child, when it comes to 6th standard, there is a lot of emphasis on skill development. There are motor skills, maybe skills like carpentry, craftsmanship, maybe gardening, agriculture on one side, and also high technology skills like coding, software development, or it may be artificial intelligence. Gradually, a child is developing into at least minimum 2 skills by the time it completes its present 12th standard. That means 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 and enters into the higher education. This has two very quick advantages. Number one is that child will be already skilled in 2 skills. So it becomes already employable in some sense. And if someone does not want to continue education further, one can terminate there at the end of these 15 years of education and get into a job or start an entrepreneurial journey. But on the other side, a child which wants to continue will have an opportunity to choose a course of its own rather than being pressurized and forced by the parents. Because the child has seen over the 15 years the strengths of each one of those different traits which are happening in the schools, and thereby it knows where its talent lies, where the child's interest lies, and it can very easily choose the right course depending on the aptitude and interest of the child. There will be less emphasis of the parents on forcing a child into a particular type of education. We have seen this kind of things happening many a times, and this will be eliminated to a great extent. So that is the second advantage. The third advantage is the child, because it has gone through a rigor of doing hands-on work, the dignity of labor, which is very, very, acute in our country, will also get established. The child would have done by hand many things. Therefore, it understands the value of work. And therefore, even if someone gets a white-collar job subsequently after graduation, it knows the cost of the labor. That means how much effort is required in order to do that work, and values and appreciates and respects that labor. Actually, that is most significant in order to create an egalitarian society. I think these are very fundamental. When you universities are all multidisciplinary, university engineering or law or medicine. Like today, some of the universities do exist. All universities are asked to be converted into multidisciplinary courses. That means an engineering university may have to start courses in arts, commerce, science, medicine, law, etc., and similarly vice versa. I think that gives a student an opportunity to study courses other than a main domain of course that he is or she is going to be dealing with. For example, a school of engineering will also have an opportunity to teach students in say music. A student of physics may be able to learn psychology. A student of medicine will be able to learn painting. I think these are very fundamental changes which will cater to the interest of the students, which is a multiple interest. And I have seen many scientists as well as many accomplished people in the world, not just in India but all over the globe. Apart from their main profession, they always had one interest in humanities and social sciences or some kind of a art, craft, design, music, some of that. I mean, someone will play a guitar, someone will be playing tabla, someone will be able to play actually sing music. I think all of these are very very important things for uh, de-stressing oneself. In our professions, we observe quite likely that there are challenges which come in place, and many times we crumble. And such skills which we have acquired at some time during the school or the college will come handy in order to de-stress ourselves. And that's why some of those accomplished people were able to spend about half an hour, 1 hour in playing some music or listening to something. I think that's what creates good ambience for working in their own field as well. I think this is what is taken care of by this education policy with multidisciplinary universities. So universities will have to transform themselves. This is a challenge for them. Either they coalesce, mix with some other organization, join together and become one entity, or expand. If they have enough land and build space, they can have more programs added. So this is one thing which many of the universities and colleges will have to do in the future. Second one is the very idea of exit and entry. So far, we had a very rigid, sort of set of rules. If a student joins in a particular program, which is a 3-year program, you'll have to complete not normally in 3 years, but waiver is given in terms of 1 or 2 years. In, if someone is sick or some problem is there in his family, and the course has to be completed in 5 years, and if a student does not complete in that 5 years, he is losing his own degree. But in the new policy, there are multiple ways of exit and entry. So if a student has to leave the education at midway, say after 1 year, he will get a certificate. If she goes after 2 years out, she may get a diploma and so on. And even the courses of arts, commerce, science, which are normally of 3 years, have been changed to 4 years. You may call it as a honors degree, a research-oriented degree, but all the courses like engineering are going to be of 4 years duration. But there is a possibility of quitting at the end of 3 years with a nominal degree. But if you want a full-fledged what we call as honors degree, you will have to complete the 4 years. I think this is a big ticket change. But whatever you do and quit and go out, there is a liberty of entering in again at any time at your time of choosing. I think this was never existed. I think this is the greatest flexibility, or what we say empowerment, to those people who find difficulty in education. There are multiple reasons why students need to quit. Either they are not interested in a course, so they change the course or they go out. There are students who, because of family difficulty, either of the transfer of the parents or death in the family of the students' parents, they don't have enough wherewithal to pay the fees, and therefore they quit the education. They take care of education of their younger siblings, and once the family is settled, they want to come back and do the education, but they are asked to start from the scratch, from the year one. I think that big change will help such students. The number may be small, but actually, this is empowerment, that any child at any time, if it feels that it's not its cup of tea, can go out, and as and when it finds interest again can come back. And then banking of credits. It's called academic banking of credits, ABC. This ABC is very important. You may do some part of the education in some X university, then go to Y university and do some other courses and earn the credits, then go to a Z university and complete the remaining courses, and together from X, Y, Z universities, whatever number of credits you have earned, if they satisfy the minimum requirements of getting a degree, you will get a degree. And degree can be from one of those three X, Y, Z universities, depending on which university you have taken more credits, and so on and so forth. I think this is another empowerment. So if student gets transferred because of his parent went from one place to the other place because of some reasons which are either the government has transferred or because the business has changed, something like that, the child should not suffer. I think this kind of empowerment never existed in our earlier policies, which has been added in this. This is a very significant change. The next comes the importance of research. All of us know that the growth of the nation depends on the research. In fact, there have been classical cases of a graph being drawn of the GDP of the country versus the research output. And it's a absolutely straight line graph, a linear graph, which shows that these are two directly proportional to each other. More the GDP of the nation, more the research output, more the research output, more the GDP of the nation. And therefore, if we want to really increase the GDP and empower all the citizens in terms of not only education, jobs, employment, and good quality of life, we need to increase naturally the GDP, and this will come only through research and innovation. And that's why a lot of emphasis there is on research, and starting off what is known as National Research Foundation for supporting the research has been talked about. This will be a huge funding mechanism, and through this particular agency, universities who want to do research not only in science, technology, medicine, law, etc., but even in humanities and social sciences, crafts, art, design, music, dance, anyone can apply for research grant and then continue to do the research. I think research is the only one which will catapult nation into the big league. Today, we talk about none of the top Indian universities and colleges and IITs and IIScs of the world are in the top 100 or 200 of the global, and only we appear in the 200 plus rankings. And in the past, as I said in the beginning of my talk, that Nalanda and Takshila were not only the first universities of the world, up to the age of 1088 AD, there was no other university. So if there was a ranking system that existed maybe to 1000 BC or 600 BC, 1000 AD, I think all Indian universities would have been number one, number two, number three, number four, number five, number six, and number seven. I think that was the power, and we have to reinvent ourselves, and that's why research is very important phenomenon in order to reach that, because in most of the global rankings, research gets more emphasis. And another emphasis which global rankings do is about how many nationalities are there in your institution in terms of the faculty profile and the college student profile. Unfortunately, our rules in the past did not allow permanent faculty to be recruited from foreign countries, nor there was an emphasis on getting in foreign students in our country. And that's why this parameter always uh, kept us under low rank. Actually, those parameters, we almost scored 0 marks. I think this new policy talks about setting up of foreign campuses of best universities in the world in India, as well as allowing Indian universities to set up campuses abroad. So I think two-way exchange of knowledge, two-way exchange of students and faculty will start getting understanding of each other. And another third parameter which is significant and important other than faculty, students, and the research profile is about the perception. And since our universities are not known to the people abroad, when a questionnaire is sent to some of the well accomplished personalities, none of them will mark Indian universities as one of them which should be considered in ranking. They only talk about MIT, Stanford, Oxford, or Cambridge, or Berkeley, and therefore our Indian universities do not appear. So, through the programs of exchange of students and faculty between those universities and our universities, setting off their campuses in India, I'm sure there will be understanding of Indian strengths by those universities. And the program which Ministry of Education now and earlier MHRD already started, called as Global Initiative of Academic Networks, GAN, where foreign professors were asked to, or were fully funded to come to India and offer 1 week or 2 week courses in India, made actually a big headway in terms of many universities knowing about Indian universities, strength of Indian students, because they have seen already that some of our Indian graduates, when they go to US and after their masters or PhD, settle down there, they go to the extent of becoming CEOs of the topmost companies in the world. So I think this is very important for Indian faculty to have academic networks and hello, is it audible?
Now.
Is it audible now?
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Oh, I'm sorry. There probably the connectivity was lost in between. So I'm back again
No issues.
onto.
No
Yeah.
issues, sir.
So,
You may
so
continue.
I was
Yes.
talking about internationalization and how we can move forward in that direction. Setting up of foreign universities from India to abroad and abroad to here, both two-way traffic is possible. GAN, as I said, many stalwarts in education, they are coming to India for last 2 years, more than about 1,500 of them. Naturally, they are drawn from 100, 200 top universities of the world. When they come here, they see the strength of Indian students and faculty. Naturally, when they are asked about Indian universities as a peer review, they will start talking about our university. I think that is where our ranking starts improving. And then, as far as research is concerned, some collaborative research is also important between Indian faculty and academia and the foreign academia. And another Spark project, under which funding for research is being made, that also will empower our Indian faculty to have collaboration with foreign faculty, and then our ranking will certainly improve. I think this is a way forward for doing research activities. As far as innovation is concerned, there is a lot of emphasis on innovation, and I would like to reflect that our examination system, right from KG to PG, has been all based on rote learning. A student remembers what is given in the notes or the textbook, and reproduces it in the examination and earns maximum marks. But if you ask the child or the student, even in the undergraduate stage or postgraduate stage, except of course in research, naturally you have to do something original. Otherwise, in most of the examinations, students would have got marks, but if you ask where is it applied, why is it so, and where else you can apply this knowledge, they will be totally blank. And that is what needs to be changed. So in the examination reforms, there must be a lot of changes in terms of not only asking questions which are based on memory, but where understanding of the student of the subject is tested, where analytical ability, critical thinking, synthesis of information, creativity, all of this needs to be tested in the university examination paper. Maybe if you do that, those who are the front benchers in the colleges and getting maximum marks through memory may get lesser marks in the future, and those who are backbenchers, and normally faculty members say that they are the disturbers of the class, may probably start getting more marks because they are more innovative. I think that change is likely to occur. That doesn't mean that you should sit in the backbench and throw aeroplanes at your faculty members. I'm not suggesting that. But what I'm saying is we must encourage students to think. And that thinking and questioning is very important in our culture in the ancient past. But somehow we regimentalized it so much that a student who asks a difficult question to the teacher is snubbed. I think moving away from that, allowing students to ask questions on one side, a lot of discussions and deliberations, both in the classroom and outside in a formal and informal way, will make an environment absolutely, what you say, fertile ground for innovation. And that is what is required. And thankfully, AICT itself, we started what is known as Smart India Hackathon in the last 4 years, which really solves the problems of the central government, state government, as well as many universities and small and large scale industries. Their problems are solved by undergraduate students. How did they do it? On one side, many times industry bodies themselves say that whatever curriculum we are designing and offering to our students, they are not capable of getting job, they are unemployable. But very same students, while forget about fourth year, in the second and third year itself are able to solve the problems of the industry. The reason is students are innovative. They have a lot of information at their doorsteps today, thanks to internet, thanks to World Wide Web, thanks to YouTube, thanks to MOOCs courses, and therefore they are already aware. If you repeat the same thing in the classroom, they are disinterested. Therefore, way of teaching learning process also needs to be changed, like the same way as examination system has to be changed. And therefore, what we call as blended learning or the learning through mixed mode or hybrid mode has to be started. And this particular pandemic has helped us in innovating in that manner. Although these all facilities and technologies were available in the past, very few institutions experimented. During pandemic, since the colleges were all closed down, every institution had to innovate and had to start online teaching learning process. And thereby we have learned the strength of technology in reaching out to the people. And this is where many questions asked when the new national education policy talks about increasing the gross enrollment ratio in higher education from present 27% to 50%. And during those 15 years, the population is also going to increase big way. And therefore, if there are 3.25 crore students in the higher education today, the number is going to be 10 crore. How can you reach so much of strength with so much of infrastructure required, so much of money required? But I think the number of new institutions that are required to be created may be very few. And the policy talks about them as well. Only in those districts where there is no university which exists today, out of 600 and odd districts, we must concentrate on only those districts for starting of the university, so that there is a university at a throwaway distance for every student. And that is what is again empowerment. And this is called as like our special economic zone, special education zone can be created in pockets. But other than that, in the existing universities, we can only add more number of students by innovatively making the timetable in such a manner that some students come in the morning, some in the afternoon or evening. And many courses can be offered in an online mode, digitally transmitting the knowledge or information to the students, and for interaction, get them onto the campuses. I think by that way, we must be in a position to reach with a limited expenditure on the infrastructure to reach out to as many students as possible, that is 50% of the population in GER, and then and anyone who is interested will get the education of his choice. I think that is also being talked about. That's why online education becomes important. Of course, we have still trouble in terms of connectivity. Today in Delhi itself, I got disconnected few minutes. Again, I came back. So this may happen in many places, especially in rural areas, remote areas. So the priority which has been planned by the government is to reach out to every nook and corner of the country. Like we started building roads to the villages right from independence. We started having electricity to all villages. The last village in Nagaland was electrified only a year back, and government should be given all the support for doing that. Similarly, reaching internet to nooks and corners, all villages in the country, and at least one common center where students can come and access internet. This has to be done on priority, and government is seized of the matter. I think by doing this, we are reaching out to nook and corner. We already have Swayam courses. Swayam is an online, which is open courses which are available by the best of the faculty, 2,500 of them, such courses by best faculty. 1.2 crore students are using them. Not only Indians, but 114 countries are watching it today. We want to expand it to 10,000 courses. We want to reach to 10 crore people. I think all this is very easily possible thanks to technology, with limited infrastructure support and funding that is required for doing this. At the other end, there may be a problem of devices being not accessible or not available to students. The mechanisms which can be worked out is providing some kind of support by way of donating them, or creating infrastructure in a common place where they can go and access this information. The minimum cost and maximum benefit, I think return on investment can be made maximum by suitable mechanisms. And if you do that, we will be in a position to reach out in terms of education to all the people. So this is as far as innovation as well as research is concerned. But in research, I talked about Spark. Spark is a program which was started by Ministry of HRD then, and now by Ministry of Education, which is continuing, where any project which faculty is to submit for funding has to be from multiple nations and multiple universities, and from not necessarily only in India, but from a foreign country. So a university in Germany or France or Japan or Canada or USA or Australia or Japan has to be involved if you want to get funding. So that way already collaboration has started happening between Indian institutions and foreign universities, and this will go a long way through what is known as National Research Foundation, which is going to be established immediately after this announcement of the policy. A large-scale funding for supporting research in all areas, including not only science, technology, but including humanities, social sciences as well. I think these are very, very important initiatives which for the first time this policy has enunciated and the implementation has begun. So my appeal to all the people who are there, you have got already, Vidya Bharati has started the competition. Knowing all these facets, you can create some videos on this, on each topic. You can create cartoons, you can create images, you can write articles, you can even have a short film explaining many of these issues which we are talking about in the new national education policy, so that people from where this policy has come, they will understand that whatever were their thought processes, they have been implemented in right spirit. And if you do that, I'm sure our new education policy will take us to places in various activities. I don't know whether I was heard that time, but I would like to repeat that in the innovation cycle, I was talking about the Smart India hackathons, which we started 4 years ago and solved the problems of the government, state government, and other agencies for the last 4 years. Prime Minister comes every year and speaks to students at 9, 8 o'clock after the students have worked for already 12 hours, and they work non-stop without sleeping for 36 hours. And that is the strength of our students. We had never utilized that, and we started utilizing, and the results are amazing. The products that students have created during those 36 hours in the software hackathon and 1 week long hardware hackathon have been used by ISRO, DRDO, Ministry of Ayush, Ministry of Railways, Ministry of Small and Medium Scale enterprises. All these ministries' problems are being used. Today we are running a drug discovery hackathon for COVID-19 and also empowering our students from biology, chemistry, chemical engineering, medicine, and also computer science and electronics to participate in this the multidisciplinary nature of drug discovery. And then once they understand the nuances, forget COVID-19, any such pandemic, when it occurs next time, we will be in a position to solve the problem within 4 or 5 months rather than waiting for a couple of years, which we are doing now. I think that is also another hackathon which is ongoing. We are talking about a toy hackathon. And this is significant because the government of India has already banned several apps from the Chinese, and many of the Indians have started developing these parallel apps. And this is Atmanirbhar Bharat. But in terms of toys, in terms of whether it is Ganapati idols during Ganesha Chaturthi or Diwali lamps, which often come from China, and we are losing a lot of foreign exchange, how we can, through this education policy, whatever empowerment is being done, our educational institutions can train students in terms of entrepreneurship, create startups through incubation centers in the organizations. Thereby, we can also reach out to Atmanirbhar Bharat, whether from starting from villages to the big cities to supply chain to the larger industries from the villages. That way, employment generation will happen. We will replace many of the products which we are importing today. And in the process, when we also study our Indian knowledge systems, Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, whether it is Ayurveda, yoga, or science, which our ancestors had already developed, and knowing the Sanskrit, if you relearn all of them, probably some of the innovations are still hidden there. Some research can be continued in those areas, and not only we become Atmanirbhar Bharat, we can give technologies to the other part of the world. I think that is where our strengths exist. With our 1.4 billion population, with our ranking in innovation improving from 81st rank 5 years ago to today 48th rank, our capability is to reach in the top 20, top 10. And I'm sure with this policy in the next 4 years, we will do phenomenally well in terms of innovation ranking, in terms of ranking of our some of the good universities into breaking into top 200 and 100. And that is what we are all looking forward to. Thank you very much. Now I stop and look forward to some of the questions which are there in the minds of our students. Hello,
Hello.
Mahamedha, are there questions? My laptop, sorry, I'm not on the laptop, mobile. So even if there are questions asked on the chat box, I would not be able to see them because the screen of the mobile is too small. So if you can read out and ask questions, I will be very happy to answer them.
Discussing the same points that you were speaking on. So we don't have any questions as of now. But I guess we are also very short in time, and we've had this very enriching and long session explaining NEP and its policies and decoding the NEP 2020 and the future of engineering and technical colleges and technical institutions in India. So on behalf of Vidya Bharati and the entire team of My NEP Competition, I would like to thank you, sir, for such an enriching session. I'm sure all our viewers, उन सबको बहुत ही ज़्यादा चीज़ें आज सीखने को मिली हैं हमारे इस सेशन से, और हम सब लोग आगे आने वाले समय में भी आपका सानिध्य इसी तरीके से प्राप्त करते रहेंगे.
महामेधा धन्यवाद, और सारे विद्या भारती के सदस्यों को और जो भी सुन रहे थे उन सब लोगों को बधाई कि हमको एक अच्छी पॉलिसी मिली है और इसका सही इस्तेमाल करके हमको आने के लिए मौका मिल रहा है. तो इस मौके को हमको पूरे के पूरी तरह से उठाना चाहिए.
बिल्कुल. एंड सर, इट्स अ रिक्वेस्ट फ्रॉम यू एज वेल. आप अपने भी सोशल मीडिया हैंडल्स पे और सब लोगों को जरूर बताएं कि www.mynep.in पर जाकर हम सभी लोग इस कंपटीशन में रजिस्टर कर सकते हैं, अपनी एंट्रीज पे को अपलोड कर सकते हैं. जितने कंपटीशन सर ने, मुझे लगता है ऑलमोस्ट सारे कंपटीशन को सर ने अपने इस सेशन के अंदर टच करा. कितने सारे कंपटीशन हम सब लोगों के लेके आए हैं, नॉट जस्ट फॉर स्टूडेंट्स अलोन. Every citizen of the country can come and participate, and it's completely centralized in this single website. हमको कहीं और जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. आप ना सिर्फ कॉम्पिटिशन्स में पार्टिसिपेट कर सकते हो, पर आपके पास में बहुत अच्छे ऑप्शंस हैं जहां से हम एनईपी एम्बेसडर, एनईपी इंस्टीट्यूशन और क्विज कॉम्पिटिशन्स के द्वारा हम सर्टिफिकेट जनरेट कर सकते हैं, जिसको हम फर्दर अपने सोशल मीडिया पे और उसको डाउनलोड करके हम यूज कर सकते हैं उन ई सर्टिफिकेट्स को. सो आई रिक्वेस्ट एवरीवन, and I request you as well, sir, to do promote my NEP competition on all your social media handles.
हाँ महामेधा जी, आप जब विद्या भारती इतना अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं तो ये हमारा दायित्व बनता है कि हमको इसको जितना स्प्रेड करें उतना करना चाहिए. और मेरा भी अपील सभी लोगों से है कि आप भी करते रहिए. आप MHRD के अभी MOE के वेबसाइट पर भी देखते रहिए, AICTE के भी वेबसाइट में देखते रहिए. हम एक दूसरे का सपोर्ट करते जाएंगे तभी तो आगे बढ़ पाएंगे.
Most definitely, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today.
थैंक यू.